welcome back to Elite Business Live 2024. We've just heard from the powerhouse that is Mirela, and now we are joined by the rest of our panel. And I'm delighted to see you again, Eric. We must stop meeting like this, although last time I think you were on Zoom, and now you're here in real life. This is very exciting.
Last time I was on Zoom, and the time before that was, I think it was the last Elite Business Live before the lockdown.
Well, let's not talk about the lockdown, right? That's a way to suppress us at the end of the day. So Eric Partaker, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who don't know, so Eric is a coach and a mentor, a peak performance expert. We can unpack that a little bit. You worked at McKinsey & Co. and helped to grow Skype into the very large business that we all know of today, although perhaps it's had its lunch slightly eaten by the likes of Zoom, Teams, and the others we've heard so much about today. Judith Germain, founder of The Maverick. Let's unpack a little bit, because I love the word The Maverick, and entrepreneurs are always telling me they're mavericks. So what is that? Is that a performance kind of a culture building organization, a coach? Tell us.
It's all about creating clear thinking and decisive leaders and really catalysing transformation throughout the entire organisation.
Okay, and you two have a book. I should have said Eric has a book. I think, is it just us that doesn't have a book?
Yes.
Do you have a book yet? Okay, good. So it's not just me, although you never know, there could be one in the works. And last but not least, we have Shalini Khemka. Is that how you say it? CBE, no less. Founder, chief exec and board director of E2E Exchange. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you very much. Firstly, thank you very much for having me. And may I congratulate Scott and Elite for hosting this, because what my business is about is helping entrepreneurs get connected. And he's doing it on steroids today, so it's brilliant to see that. So what I founded 12 years ago as an organisation to help entrepreneurs get connected to like-minded entrepreneurs and to the ecosystem of corporate support services that they might need. We help with Series A and Series B round fundraising, and we help place people like many of the people on the panel onto the boards of high-growth companies, because we believe in sending the lift down.
And you're pretty busy with other stuff too, right? You're an advisor to the Mayor of London,
Correct.
I believe, and you were a previous advisor to the Department for International Trade, which is obviously very relevant to this discussion when we're talking about kind of going global.
Yes.
So let's start from the kind of beginning. So how do you build a kind of create a culture of growth and kind of align a team behind you? Eric, I'm going to come to you first. How important is that, kind of seeding that right from the very beginning?
Essential, and it, you know, to put it into perspective, I mean, just picture a circle, you know, around yourself, and if you picture that circle by design, the area is finite, right? You can see how much space you have, and the moment you take one step outside that circle, the space becomes infinite. And when you start to change mindsets so that people can recognize the infinite space, you know, in terms of their growth, in terms of their capabilities, then, you know, from a global point of view, with all the variations that you experience in terms of cultures and different market trends and different types of people, those two things just go hand in hand, you know, for success. So, you know, absolutely important to start to foster that by getting people to understand very, very simply from an individual mindset point of view of how, you know, recognizing the infinite growth is the very first step.
And Judith, what does a growth mindset mean to you? When you hear that expression, what does it bring to mind?
So for me, a growth mindset is recognising that anything is possible. In fact, everything is possible. And you're not held hostage to what you failed in the past. It's all about moving forward. And for me as well, it's all about how to hack the brain. So if you understand the way your brain works, you can hack it so that you can grow infinitely.
Okay, really interesting. And that comes back to some of the points that you made as well, doesn't it, Mirela? Around, I always find the kind of conversation around failure is really interesting, particularly if we look at how we talk about failure in the UK compared to, say, the US. I feel like you probably have a perspective on that. You know, we should embrace failure, shouldn't we?
You know what? Whatever it happens, it's important that you take ownership of it and you are able to deal with it. Because if something is happening, it's happening for you to grow, it's happening for you to get the lesson. And I absolutely agree with Judith. It's about the mind. You know, the only people that we never reach our maximum potential is us, humans. So there is no limit what we can do. Every single day we have the opportunity to reprogram, to reset, to recreate, to reinvent, to forgive ourselves, because the biggest mistake we do, we never forgive ourselves. So we have to let go what is going and let come what is coming. And it's very important that we surround ourselves with the right people. And once you surround yourself with the right people and you have the right mindset, then you just let things come.
And Eric, in your experience as a coach, can you, and it's one of the questions we've got coming through here from our audience, can you transform your mindset? If you haven't got a growth mindset, can you get one?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anyone who hasn't read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, talks specifically about, that subject. But it's not to say that you don't get into ruts. You talked about Skype. That's the illustrious part of, it's like the favorite part of my career to talk about. After Skype, we sold to eBay for a few $1 billion. That was a life-changing event. I poured my heart and soul into a restaurant chain that I built in the UK. And 13 years, 11 years of, it felt like glorious times, and 2 very, very hard years, ending in a rather spectacular failure. And so I was in a rut following that. It put me into that fixed mindset of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do next? And there was so much, though, to your point, that I learned from that, which have helped me, not just personally, but also, others, both benefit from their own, growth opportunities and their own failures. I think it was Nelson Mandela had this amazing quote, something along the lines of, you're either winning or learning. Yeah. Either way, you're succeeding. And so, all of those things for me personally, have been absolute, nuggets for me. So.
Yeah, and I definitely want to come back to that kind of how you bounce back from failure, because I think that's a really good topic to unpack here. But Shalini, in terms of that kind of sharing of lessons learned, particularly from failures, that's what kind of networks and communities and indeed forums like this are all about, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes. I think that we should celebrate failure. There's a lot of learning. I think the greatest learning actually comes from the times that you go through the toughest times and you have the hardest journeys. And one of the things that I think is very, very important, as everybody's saying on here, is mindset, but to allow yourself the time to invest in going on external training. For example, one of our investors, Mirela knows them, they're called Avnish and Anita Goyle. I started this year by going on the 7th of January to the Vision Board. And the Vision Board one-day conference, and I felt it's a Sunday, it's my whole day out. It's an investment of my time, but it was actually very, very worth it because it's like a mini Tony Robbins resetting program. And what I've learned over the last 12 years is actually it's very, very important to keep investing that time, to take time out, doing things like a day like this, to make sure that you are spending the time to invest in your own mindset. And I think you'll take it away from this whole next 2 days that everything in life is about mindset. And I find that when we have dinners, quite often small dinners, and at the last dinner, there were very powerful people in the room, and I found that the most listening came when they talked about their issues, where they talked about their children. Someone had a bipolar child, someone had an autistic child, and that's when the human element, and that when we talked about the difficulties and the challenges, we became much closer as a community. So I think there's a lot to learn from it.
And there's a few things I want to come back to here, particularly around coaching, and I think some of the kind of key figures we have in this space. Coaching has a bad reputation in certain circles, right? But before we get to that, Judith, why don't you tell us a bit about how you feel the kind of growth mindset works in terms of leadership development? Like, how much do we need to invest in ourselves as leaders? And also, as a business gets to different stages, like, it's not always the founder's not always the right person to lead it through the next stage of growth, are they?
Not necessarily, no. I think what's really important is to understand what you can do, what you're passionate about, and when's the right time to move it on. And I think one of the things that can be quite problematic is that leaders don't understand the necessity of a growth mindset. So you need to do this, got to do it done now, I don't want to hear anything about it. That is not going to work for anybody because, you know, we've all got our own kind of psychological makeup. When I'm mentoring people, I'm often reframing what they're saying. So they'll say, I'm going to be your worst client. You're like, no. Or I'm always doing this wrong. And I will just say, you used to get this wrong, but today's a different day. And what I've noticed as well is that it doesn't take too long before people start to stop and reframe automatically. And there's lots of strategies to do that, and it makes such a big difference. I had one client who had imposter syndrome. And the next time I met him, I said, how's it going? And he said, I think it's reduced by about 90%. And I said, oh, really? Why is that? And I'd given him some exercises that he could work on himself. And they were difficult, but he did them every day. And the difference in his ability to move forward and how to frame himself was unbelievable.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because you sort of have to put the work in. It's a bit like going to the physio. We all go to the physio and expect them to fix us. But if we don't do the exercises they set us, then we get in trouble with them. The issue never gets fixed, right? So it's important to reinvest that time.
Yeah, and it's important to pace people through the change as well. So I said to him, this is going to be really irritating, and it's going to take a long time to get it right, and you're going to feel like it's rubbish and you can't do it. However, when you feel like that, this is what you do. So he was already prepared that it was going to be a slog. Mm-hmm. And by doing the hard slog, he made the difference.
And it's interesting you mentioned that it's a he, because I think when we think about imposter syndrome, certainly I often associate it more with women than men. And I see you nodding along. It's not me just being sexist. So, Eric, I want to talk to you about coaching, right? And I have only heard brilliant things about Eric's coaching, by the way. I know a few of your clients who rave about you. But not all coaches were born equally, right? And there's lots of kind of smoke and mirrors. There's the kind of accusations of snake oil salesman. I met Gary Vee recently, and he obviously receives a lot of negative press. Not from me. I think my article was very balanced. You can read it at the Times Online. But yes, not all coaches were created equally, right? How do you go about finding the right one for you? Do you get recommendations? And do you have to make sure that that kind of chemistry is right?
The number one thing is what you just said at the end there is chemistry. Mm-hmm. You know, it's sort of like, it's the same thing with a marriage or a business partnership. You know, you have to have that chemistry or it's not going to go anywhere. So that's first and foremost, and that's like a felt, intuitive sense. There's no scientific formula for that. You know, you'll know it when you see it. And then it comes down, I think, to preference. Personally, I don't coach really from the basis of a suite of certifications, per se, as much as, from just in the trenches experience. So, I've seen everything from, multi-billion-dollar success, personally, to seeing everything go up in smoke in an instant. And so I think it gives me the ability to kind of coach and mentor on kind of everything in between. There's a lot of great people out there. So I think it's just a matter of, meeting several and seeing who you have the best chemistry with.
Mm-hmm. Mirela, have you had a coach?
Yes, I do have many coaches. And thanks to these coaches, I have been able to lead my business. But I do not coach myself.
Okay.
Not because I don't believe in coaching. It's just I think there are many people that are doing a great job out there. I usually just say to my ladies, I say, hey, great, you go from one course to another, from one coach to another. How about we take some actions now? Mm-hmm. For me, it's all about bringing them together, giving them a microphone, encouraging them in a safe zone, in a safe environment to just start sharing your story, expressing yourself, believing on yourself, believing on your vision. And for me, that is very important. But definitely good credits to all great coaches. Mm-hmm. For me, it's more about visibility, exposure, unlocking that fear and unlocking that blockage, psychological blockage that we have deep inside us. Maybe coaches definitely help on that. But for me, it's like you can't learn swimming unless you jump in a swimming pool. You can't learn swimming on reading books or going to a coach. What I mean swimming, business. So, and at the end of the day, knowing one thing and doing what you know, they are complete two different things. That's why from the moment that we learn something, it's important that we start practicing it and taking baby steps. And it's not about one big deal shot, because there is not such success that you get one big thing and that's your life is changed. I don't believe on that. It means consistency. It means every single day you wake up in the morning, no matter what, you feel inspired or not inspired, you go and serve for what you are meant to do in this world.
So talking of jumping straight in, obviously one of the themes of this panel as well is around going global. Shalini, so when it comes to taking those initial kind of steps, growing your business overseas,
Yes.
how important is the mindset in making that first step? Do you have to go in kind of eyes open, prepared to learn? Do you have to go in full of confidence? What would you say? How would you draw on your experience?
I would say it's a combination of the two. I think it's very important before you go international to do your market research, to really understand that the market that you're going into, and if you can have local people, I think that would help. There's one of our members here, his name is Tarang Patel, he's sitting over there. He's now doing a lot in Dubai, but I know that he took steps before he transitioned into Dubai, and I think it's you have to be sensible about it. You have to know when is the right time to go international, because if you move far too quickly, you might then handicap what you're doing locally. So I think doing it gradually, carefully, and we've been talking about coaches. I do think a coach or a consultant or some kind of advisor when you're going international makes a huge difference. Makes a huge difference in every way. I have somebody who I spend 8 hours with a week to help me think through how to pivot my business, how to keep my energies aligned, because it's hard running a company. And it sounds like it's a full day, but I have made that investment personally because I felt, look, I've been running my business for 12 years. I want to change it to the next level. I need that advice, and I need somebody. The person who's helping me, he is a business coach, and it's expensive, but it's actually very, very worth it. So in the beginning, I used to think, oh my goodness, the day rate is so high. But now I realize that actually I've saved a lot of money by learning tricks and how to manage myself better. So it also requires that shift in your own mind about how you want to invest. So I would say there's two key words I'd like to encourage is mindset and personal investment. Yeah.
Really important point, although 8 hours a week, I feel like that's probably more time than I spend with my husband. So yeah, real commitment indeed. So Eric, let's come back to this point around resilience, right? Because it's a really important one. And often when I speak to entrepreneurs, they'll tell me it's their most important traits, right? To be resilient, because as you say, there are so many knockbacks. So something that often comes up when I host panels like this is, how do you bounce back? So how did you bounce back from what happened with Chilangos, which was excellent, by the way. I used to very much enjoy your burritos.
Yes.
But obviously, it must have personally really taken its
It's
toll.
horrible.
Yeah.
It's horrible. You're in tears. You think it's all over. You know, it's so hard to, mentally pick yourself back up. But you have to go through the trough before you can get to another peak. And resilience is a great word, but there's a better word. So Nassim Taleb wrote a fantastic book called Anti-Fragile. And to kind of drive the concept home, like picture that you're a shipping crate. And if you were a shipping crate, I would ask, well, what's the label on the side of the crate? Does it say fragile, where you can take a few hits and then you break? You might say it says robust, you could take a few more hits, but eventually you'll still break. You might say, no, it says, resilient. But by definition, that just means you absorb shock and you return to the same. The true opposite of fragile is anti-fragile, whereby the more hits you take, the stronger you become. And that might sound a bit superhero-ish, but it's actually something that's fundamental to all of our physical bodies. So how do you build an immune system? You expose it to germs and bacteria. You don't will it into action. How do you grow a muscle?
Yeah.
You stress it. That's what causes it to grow. And so when you start to recognize that your body is the perfect temple for anti-fragility, whereby the more stress and hits you take, the stronger you become, it enables you to bring that upstairs mentally. And once that happens, then things really, explode for you, because the things that knock you back, it's like that Japanese proverb, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. And so as long as you just keep standing up that last time, which is what I did, and thereafter, these days we've now experienced, more success, business-wise, financially, everything, than in all the years, prior. So we've bounced back in a big way, and it's absolutely possible for anyone and everyone.
And it's that old adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
Yeah.
And Judith, how do you think about failure when you're working with your clients? Is it a similar kind of gear change?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about learning from what went on, but I think it's also, for me, I take a very pragmatic approach. First of all, if something's gone wrong, you need to feel it. And I like to take the emotion out of it and say, right, if I was somebody else, almost put yourself in the third person. If I was Judith, what would I advise her to do? And then actually work out what needs to do moving forward. So you do take those stresses, you do push it forward. And that's what I see in terms of failure. You cannot succeed if you don't go out your comfort zone. Nobody grows unless you're stretched. So it's a case of once you've recognised that you've gone through a failure and you have succeeded, then you have self-efficacy. You will get through the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And it's about not being afraid of failing. It's recognising, yes, I may fail, but I will succeed at the next time.
I have loads more questions. Do we have any questions from the floor? Because this is always a topic that really gets everybody fired up. Do we have any? Whilst you're thinking of those, did you see one, Steve? Perfect. Sorry, sir. We'll get a mic to you now. If you could just say where you're from, what your name is, and your question, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Marcus Matthews. I'm a life transformation coach. My business is Make Your Life Count. I agree with everything that you've just said, but things like mindset, well-being, mental health have become like Uber and Google. So I think there needs to be a discussion around psychological safety, because good coaching, good leaders create environments of psychological safety. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on, do we need to change the narrative and start talking about psychological safety and how leaders can create those environments to empower people and empower business?
Mirela, I feel like this comes back to some of the points in your presentation.
For me, that is the biggest thing, because I come from a culture where I feel threatened all the time. I feel threatened by taking actions. I feel threatened by jealousy, by all kind of, human nature. And I feel that is the most important thing I want to create in my community. I have been in many times in many communities where I was scared to tell who I am, to share my story, because I would live in tears, because I felt judged, I felt discriminated. And I don't blame them. I'm not making the victim. But then I thought, okay, I'm so glad this happened to me, because I'm not going to allow that to happen in my community. And if somebody comes to my community and tries to threaten me and say, darling, I love you, I'm going to open the door, let you go, or whoever it is, and I'm not going to allow you to interrupt my mission, my purpose. So you have to stand for something. And it's scary. But once you believe on your vision and you're loyal to that vision and you are serving for something and you create that, many times I see women shaking when they come first time. I mean, not shaking. I've seen women crying in tears. They didn't want to come on stage because they felt so scared. And I have also women, a couple of women in this room right now. And once I bring them slowly, said, yes, you can do this. Yes, you can do this. You're going to do it right now. When they said, hey, ladies, how about we say, yes, you can do this. And she comes and say, I have also in my website a lady who said, she came, said, I can't talk. And she said, 30 seconds. And then she took 30 seconds, 1 minute, 5 minutes. I said, please give me the mic back. She was liberating herself. So this is what I call safe environment. But do not dare to open yourself in an environment where you do not feel safe, because you may kill your confidence forever. Find your tribe, find your people, and move on.
Really great advice, thank you. But there was also a point that came out there around well-being, and I don't feel like we've talked about that enough, about kind of looking after your well-being in a very holistic way. So, Eric, when I'm sure you were at kind of some of those peaks you talked about earlier, were you looking after yourself? Were you eating properly? Were you exercising? It sounds like the basics, but you have to get the basics right in order to thrive, don't you?
Yeah. In 2010, I almost died from a heart attack on board a plane, so 35,000 feet in the air. Plane emergency landed. I was taken onto a runway. It was in France, and they administered nitrates right there on the runway to open up blood flow to the heart. And I remember as a paramedic looked down at me, I remember I said, "Please don't let me die. I have a 5-year-old son who's now 19 and at the University of Bristol." And I was so grateful to have, when I woke up the next day in the hospital, and I was like, oh, whew, you know. And I was full of regret and shame and guilt, because I realized that all the hard driving I had been doing, I mean, I would work sometimes like 48 hours straight, like with no sleep. I was at, McKinsey doing 100-hour weeks, then, building Skype, the early days of the restaurant chain. It was just constant pushing. And I had this feeling of invincibility. And then my body eventually said, "No, you're not," right? And so the things that I was not respecting then are very, very basic things. When we're talking about psychology, for example, but we have to recognize that, probably 90% of your psychology is driven by your physiology. And it's really basic stuff, like getting your sleep right and, getting your nutrition right. And, we're made to move as human beings, although we're seated right now.
Should we do some laps?
Yeah. And when you get those things right, your body will look after you. When you don't, you'll, potentially pay a price. I will say, just to close it, that my cardiologist years ago told me I was able to stop seeing him because I did implement all of these things and did it to a very, very, a high degree. And he said, "Eric, if I were to refer you to another cardiologist and not share your, history of trauma, they wouldn't be able to, see, anything really wrong with you. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it." So the body has an incredible way of being able to repair and heal itself, but only if you respect those fundamentals.
Wow, what a powerful story. Thank you very much for sharing that, Eric. Shalini, how do you look after yourself?
I have to be very honest, I struggled as well last year. It's easy to say, be disciplined, do these things. When you're running a company and we launched a new initiative, I didn't realize, I felt a bit like Eric, that I can just get on with it. I ended up in hospital at Christmas time, and it's taught me a very hard lesson, which is I didn't take 1 day's holiday last year. I didn't take any breaks, and although I did exercise in the morning, I didn't sleep enough. So now what I've done is every month I'm taking a long weekend, and I've put it in my diary that every month I have to take a long weekend. And I've learned that the hard way, to be honest, because whatever I suffered, if I'm not careful, it can keep reigniting in my body, which is an autoimmune issue. And so I don't want to say anything which isn't true, it's so hard. You have to have that inner self-discipline and that self-knowledge, and sometimes you go through a very tough time to make yourself realize that. But I'd encourage you guys not to go through the tough time that I went through, to go through that. So my learning is, do your exercise, try and get the sleep, and take some regular breaks. It is actually very, very important. Mm-hmm. And I feel so much better now. Yeah.
Thank you, Shalini. And Judith, last words to you on this. So what do you advise your clients, kind of above and beyond what these guys have already said in terms of taking care of themselves? Because history shows that entrepreneurs have a tendency to talk about how they can go forever. They sort of take pride in the fact they haven't taken a holiday for 3 years, and they sort of compete for who's the hardest. But that's not the right attitude, is it?
No, and I'm going to take a bit of a maverick stance on this.
Excellent.
In the sense that, for me, it's all about boundaries. The way I look at it is that, why as entrepreneurs are we working a Monday to Friday week? Isn't that the point we left the corporate in the first place? There are 24 hours in the day. You choose how you want to spend those hours. So if you want to, work for 3 hours from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, hang out with the kids, and then do another 3 hours later, and that works for you, it works for you. I think we're living in the world now which is asynchronous. We don't need to be mirroring corporate hours if it doesn't work for us. So I would say, for me, it's just like you set the boundaries, you live the life that you want to live, because we're all different and we're all unique. So sometimes I will nap at 12 o'clock because I feel like it. And another day I will be like this morning, up at 3 in the morning because it's quiet. But because I'm not trying to stick to the 9 to 5 or the 8 to 6, it works and it feels like it's blended. I'm not doing too much. I'm doing the hours I want when I want.
Amazing note to end on. I know you have something to add.
One sentence. It's very simple. 8 hours sleep, 8 hours work, 8 hours entertainment. When I share this, they ask me, do you apply this? No. No, because I don't do 8 hours work. I don't work at all. Now, question, am I working now? I have no idea. I'm entertaining myself. I'm not. If you love what you do, you never work. You never get tired or exhausted. And you do not stop when you're tired. You stop when you arrive.
I think that was more than one sentence, but we'll let you off. Thank you so much, Shalini, Judith, Eric, and Mirela. Thank you for that fascinating discussion. Thank you.